This is a test. This station is conducting a test of the emergency broadcast system. This is only a test.
James McMahon Music Podcast. James McMahon Music Podcast. James McMahon Music Podcast. James McMahon Music Podcast. He speaks to the geeks and the musical freaks, but sometimes popular but mostly a freak because he's James McMahon Music Podcast. James McMahon Music Podcast.
This concludes this test of the emergency broadcast system.
Hello.
Hey.
I've realised that I often start this podcast by saying, right then, and I'm trying not to do that.
I like that. It's like we're about to get into it. I just said to my wife, she was just leaving. She was kind of scarpered with the baby when I started this, and I was like, don't worry, it's not like, maybe it is therapy. So,
do you know what? People do say that a lot. I'm really trying to, as part of my own kind of work on the problems I have OCD. So as part of like the treatment I have for OCD, I'm actually trying to be a little bit less sort of intense about feelings and emotions, and actually just trying to sort of dick around a bit more, because I think I'm quite good at dicking around. But this podcast people do seem to sort of, I often get PRs saying, can you get so-and-so on the band? I think you could have a very deep conversation. And I'm sort of
right.
like, you know.
It's a bit scary. It's a bit scary when it's presented as that, isn't it? It's like when you're in the smoking area with someone, you just know that they've got a lot to offload because they've never done it sober.
It's that thing, isn't it? When people say, "Hey, how you doing?" and the only thing that you're supposed to answer is, "Yeah, I'm fine." But what if you're not? Do you know what I mean? It's hard work.
Yeah, because I've been in those situations where you ask someone, and I'm all ears, but you ask someone, you right now? Ask someone, and then they say they're not fine, and then you kind of go into it, and you kind of realize that, maybe it's not the time. Maybe there is a time and a place for it, and that's why it's so hard when you have friends that you feel like you need to talk to, and you need to make sure that you talk to them, but you've got a lot of your own shit going on as well. Can you swear on here, by the way?
Oh yeah, it's encouraged.
Okay, fine. a lot of your own stuff going on, and it's just trauma dumping, isn't it? It's like either way. It doesn't have to be, but it's
interesting. You just turned 30, right?
32 now. I keep thinking I've just turned 30, but yeah, I'm getting on.
It's just strange. I mean, I'm at that age. I'm 43, 44 this summer, so allow me to sort of play the kind of wise old
veteran.
Yeah. It's the only thing people who are getting older have going for them, is that they can be a bit patronizing now and again. I mean, you are so young, and I know you feel like
no, you're right.
Yeah, because this record's about getting older, though, right? This
record is about my childhood, and it's about me being open about it for the first time in public, really. And it's the reason for that being is not because I wanted to speak about it when I was younger, and I was encouraged to talk about the sun or whatever, but that was what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about romance, love, girls, and the sun, and visiting California, but now, after a decade, the way I see it, you get to the end of your 30s, and you're right, I am so young, and I still feel young, and I know that in 5 years' time I will look back and be saying, "Oh, you were so young then." So never feel old, because it's always the way. My wife's nan actually said, shortly before she died, she said we were talking about someone that was 60 or something, 62, and she was 70 something, late 70s, and she said she had a Iraqi kind of Jewish accent. She said, "Oh, so young, what an age." And talking about a 62-year-old, and it put it all into perspective for me. Anyway, that was a tandem.
No, I think okay. So I said, I said this record was about getting older, and you immediately stonewalled me by saying this was about your childhood. But what I think I meant by that was, was that perhaps it was perhaps the reason why you decided to explore childhood experiences or talk about your childhood was because of the sort of the lurch of getting older. Like I was reading that you'd been an expectant father. I don't know whether you've had a child now.
Yeah, she's here. Yeah,
nice. All good.
Yeah, honestly, amazing. Yeah, but you're right to say that. That is the reason that I started to reflect, and it's another coming of age, I guess. I've been through grief, and now I've got a baby of my own, and I feel like an adult now. Well, I feel like I can reflect maturely and emotionally on what affected me when I was a child, and how, like I said before this interview started, about the phobia that my mum gave me, not gave me on purpose, but gave me the needles, and what I can then give to my child, good or bad. She is going to look up to me and my wife, and she's going to copy everything we do, and she's going to feel the way that we do. And if I put myself down in the mirror, she's going to see that, and she's going to, I don't know, it's you just don't know how to do it. There's no perfect way to do it, of course. But so this album was me reflecting on all that. I did this before we even knew we were having a baby anyway, but reflecting on what affected me, and then how I lived in my 20s, and all those things that happened to me, because I've had quite a full life, I guess. I've lived a dream, as a lot of people back in my hometown say, but for me it feels very normal because it's just, it's what I do. But I do understand that I've gone to these amazing places, played gigs. That was my dream as a kid, and it still is. But it's about seeing how that all those mistakes, all those successes, all those things, and now that I'm 30, how do I balance it out? How do I steady the ship? Because it was very rocky. Excuse the metaphor. It was a very rocky ship at the end of my 30s, and a lot of breakdowns happened. Yeah.
I mean, it sort of fell apart, kind of the turn of the millennium. Is that right?
I fell apart. My band fell apart. Yeah. It fell apart. The world fell apart, I guess.
Yeah.
If you put it so dramatically, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think your best songs kind of sound like everything needed to fall apart, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah,
there's something kind of searching and yearning about the music that you make. Or my favorite Swim Deep songs that sort of sound like, I don't know, they sort of sound like they could only have been written if you were kind of white knuckling some of your life. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, no, you're right.
I'm not sure it can be forced.
It can't be, and that's the difficulty about it, is that even if you force yourself into these spaces where you think you write best, that the fact that you've actually forced yourself there in the first place is often gets in the way. But yeah, I guess so. Even the early songs that felt very, that I at the time and for the last 10 years have thought were very naive and very simple and whimsical. But it's only now really I look back on them and hear some of the lyrics, and now it's like reading a book where I'm reading this sorry, this is a tandem again. It's like I'm reading this Mark Lanigan book at the moment.
Oh, it's a cracker, isn't it?
So good. And every chapter I go through, I look on YouTube and watch one of his performances from that chapter, or that moment that he's talking about, and I get to see him knowing that the night before that he was blackout drunk, which is a nightmare for anyone, a fear. And to be honest, like nowadays, like if you get blackout, you probably should like hand yourself into the authorities or something because you never know. Do you know what I mean? And it's just, I don't know. It's interesting to see where you're at. So when I look back on those songs, even though I thought they were just, first pop songs I written, first naive little lyrics I wrote, I can understand that actually what I was going through and the lyrics do match up in a much more mature way. Oh, well, a much more interesting way than I thought at the time.
I mean, one of the things I've realised about myself recently is I've written a book, which is
Amazing.
coming out next year, which is basically about me being a music journalist and, kind of crazy madcap adventures. But through the through the lens of me having OCD and finding an awful lot of things quite difficult and having quite a difficult childhood. And one of the things I've sort of realized from writing that book is that I really understand. I mean, my dad died halfway through writing the book as well, which was, very, very. It's the sort of thing I think my dad kind of did, to be honest. Like,
did you have a good relationship with him?
No,
you don't have to.
No,
you don't have to answer that.
No, it's fine. It's all bets are off on this podcast. No, it's complicated would be the word. I loved him dearly.
Of course.
I loved him to the ends of the earth, but I'm not sure I totally kind of felt that reciprocated. And now he's not here. So what can you do about that? But the thing I sort of realized, which is kind of relates to what I'm going to ask you, is that, from writing that book, I understand why. I mean, you just mentioned needles. One of my early OCD obsessions was that I was HIV positive. I was just obsessed that there was no reason why I could be, but it's all I could think about, and I kind of lost a year of my life because
I've been there.
Yeah, right. And when I know exactly why. I absolutely know that a lot of it was about kind of growing up around the fear that my dad projected into sort of our immediate orbit. And I guess that, so all day long, and you know what, I'm from Yorkshire, right? I'm from Yorkshire. I'm 43. I'm a big fan of the Stoics. So I'm not a big fan of this sort of trend in our culture of everything is someone else's fault, because I just think that's like,
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, it's sort of transplanting. I just think that maybe it is, but what are you gonna do about it? But I wonder whether you having these realizations about yourself when you were younger, or things that had happened, or how that had shaped you, like, what do you do with that? Is it is the case you just write songs about it?
Practically what I wanted to do with that was kind of manage how I raised my daughter to not have the issues that I have, which again I do not have. I had, on reflection, and at the time, I thought I had a great childhood. My mum and dad broke up when I was 5, so I never actually experienced them being happy together. It was always, and the first time I ever said that was a couple of years ago. Said it to my wife, and I just broke down immediately. And I think that was the first time that I'd ever realized that I'd never actually seen them. I grew up with a love that was, it was a battle. It wasn't ceremony or whatever. It wasn't nice. But separately, great. They looked after me well. They taught me very well my morals. They taught me to be they wanted me to be a musician. They never got that when they grew up. So it's interesting now when I talk to them about how they grew up and they were told to do certain things. So they massively told me to, if I like something, go and do it, even though we were a working class family, even though that there's no money to be made in music. It was very much just like, just do it as long as you're happy. I think that's fine. And so I'm kind of at war with, what do I instill on her? Because I've been taught to be very open. So am I going to go down the path of telling her to hedge her bets, or like be really, am I going to be scared if she wants to pick up an instrument? I'm not, but I've already realized that. But that's what made me look into my childhood. And it's interesting, because even though I thought it was great, you look back and you think that maybe actually it wasn't. Maybe I was a very, very anxious child and very scared. I mean, there was times where I didn't leave my house for a year because I had it in my head that someone was out for me at school, and I used to like run home from school and stuff for a year. And it took me a while to get back and feel comfortable by even going down the street. And before that, I was such an outgoing kid. I used to just go to a skate park on my own, where there was loads of horrible kids, but loads of great kids as well. And I mean, there's a lot of reflection.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I feel a little bit like maybe we have some kind of interconnected soul. By the way, that's quite a deep thing to say 20 minutes into a podcast, but you are describing a few experiences which are very very familiar to me.
I
I
felt
think
comfortable with sharing that with you because I knew that might be the case.
I think it's that thing of like, I often sort of, I've sort of realized that with my parents that my mum was doing an awful lot of the heavy lifting that I maybe didn't realize at the time. Like the reason why I had, you know, um, new He-Man toys on my birthday was because my mum had gone and got them. Like it wasn't necessarily my dad.
Yeah.
My mum was the one that was sort of keeping the illusion of a sort of happy family alive.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so there is that thing when I think about kind of growing up, and I think, my dad did punch me once, in the face. I was far too young for that to be happening and all that sort of stuff. But like when I think about I remember nice family holidays and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's the other things that sort of you described. And again, you can't kind of go back and really kind of, you can only really sort of try to break the cycle. But I suppose what I would ask then is that I occasionally say I'm married now. I don't have a kid, but we are hopeful. And there is a lot of, like every so often say, if me and my wife have a bit of a niggle, which, that happens, in my head, I'm going, am I being like my mum and dad? Like,
Yeah.
am I, do you find that?
Like all the time. I was speaking to my brother about this. My brother actually just texted me saying, talking about my song that he just heard, the new one. And I was talking about the lyrics in one of the captions, and he said, he was saying that he always loves to hear about these lyrics, especially on this new album, because it's a bit more raw, I guess. And we've had one or two deep conversations, me and my brother, about our childhood, and they've been great, but they've been very recent. And he was just saying anyway, it's like therapy for me to listen to you explain those lyrics or talk about those lyrics, because I often forget that me and my brother went through the same childhood, and we're 2 years apart. He's older. So you go through, I don't know, it's crazy to think we went through that same thing and we never talked about it. And we're so close, but we never talked about it. And we got all, I do feel like maybe there was differences to our childhood in a way that he was the older one. So maybe he got more of something, or maybe he got less of something, whether that was discipline or not discipline or freedom or, all these things, or love, but like I said, both my parents are amazing people. So that makes it even harder for me to talk about my childhood sometimes, because I don't want to be like, oh, we had it bad. There's people on my road that had it worse than me. I had it really good, but sometimes if I talk about it, I'm like, yeah, I had it good, but I'm still allowed to talk about issues, because it's a thing my mum and dad probably didn't do. They had a nice childhood. Well, yeah. And, there's things that you don't talk about. You can, it's fine. Mary, my daughter, she's going to grow up and she's going to be like, oh, that probably came from my dad, or that probably came from my mom. And that's going to be heartbreaking, but you're just humans trying to have good relationships with people. That's all you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when I loved my grandparents, like my dad's parents. I didn't really know my granddad, but I loved my nana. But like when I got older and I started to sort of maybe appreciate that some of the things I thought were quite normal about my nana was actually, she was kind of fueled by anxiety and kind of Catholic guilt. And, I found out that she'd gone into a workhouse. She was very old,
wow.
So it was a totally different, it's just a world that you just can't even imagine. And I just think that actually the best thing you can kind of do, or the only thing to do really, is to sort of try to break the cycle of this stuff. And I always get told in therapy, I always get told that sort of like recognition is like the most important thing. There's loads of things I say with my OCD, like occasionally I will still get an obsession that someone wants to murder me, or like bonkers irrational stuff. But in the past I would have thought it was real. Whereas now I can go, oh, that's a strange thought, and I still have to battle it. But if you don't attach meaning to it,
can I ask you about that OCD, please?
Yeah, of course.
I've never considered OCD. I've been one of those people that's always just seen it as someone that likes And my mum, like something clean as soon as you finish your food and get rid of it, kind of thing. But over lockdown, I went through a few phases. You ask my wife, she'll tell you. A lot of them were, I'm gonna die for this reason or this reason. I've got heart problems. I'm very, very, very certain I've got heart problems, or I've got a brain tumor from a headache. 'Cause I never get headaches, so it must be a tumor. And I got out of them by a very lengthy process of speaking out loud and saying, I don't, I thought it was stupid at first. I don't have a heart problem, or I don't have a brain tumor. And I do this on jogs around. I say it out loud. I must have looked like a white wally. Just do it on jogs saying, I don't have a brain tumor. And eventually I said it enough. I forgot about it. It kind of, sort of one of those things, you know, you have a scab, you're thinking about it all the time. And then suddenly you're like, oh, I don't have that scab anymore. I thought that was anxiety, but I guess, is there a bit of OCD in that? I mean,
Well,
I'm not trying to fucking add more diagnosis to myself either. I'm not, but I don't know. It sounds similar.
well, I mean, you know, the usual caveat is that I'm not a doctor, right? So, you know, I don't want to, and obviously people are
Uh,
listening to us have a conversation. So I'm saying that more for the benefit of people listening.
yeah,
You know, I don't have any qualifications in this area, but it does sound like OCD. I think that I'll give you a really potted sort of version of sort of my stuff is that HIV obsession I had was when I was 19, and it kind of came from nowhere. I mean, I look back and I think I was having some quite irrational fears before that, but that
right.
really was sort of quite classic. And I missed a bunch of diagnoses. You know, like I went to see the doctor when I was 19. They put me on an SSRI that doesn't exist anymore. It kind of made it fade.
Right.
I thought my early 20s was actually a time where there was a lot of fun, but thinking about it, there was crazy obsessions about,
Yeah.
you know, having to touch things a certain amount of time to sort of make me not worry about things and,
Yeah.
you know, things like that. But when I was at the NME, actually, when I was staff at the NME, I was like 28, and it just got intolerable. Like I couldn't leave
Right.
the office until I couldn't leave the office until I touched the desks a certain amount of times, and I just had
Yeah.
these absolute out there obsessions about things. And I got a diagnosis when I was 28 at a place called the Maudsley Hospital in Camberwell, which is like the best place in the country. And I just
Yeah.
went, well, you know, I don't wash my hands. You know, I'd seen like OCD on like Casualty on like a sort
Yeah.
of,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you know, I didn't do those things. And then it was only really when things got very bad about 7 years ago, when I was 38, I think that is 37, that I actually went, or my wife went, you know, this, you know, you shouldn't be living like this. We shouldn't be living like this. Things were sort of gearing more towards me being like, I'm not sure I can take another day of this. You know,
Right. Yeah.
I'm
Well.
I'm sort of trying to sort of read between, you know, sort of
Yeah.
say something without saying something, just to not bring
I
down the
get
vibe, you know.
you.
But I spoke, and you know, since then, you know, I found my way to the Priory. I found my way to an amazing therapist. I'm not saying that I'm, you know, cured, but I definitely enjoy my life a lot more than I used to. I've got a lot of
It's great.
ambition back. You know, I'd really, things were going one way, and actually understanding OCD, I found a support group. I made friends with people who had OCD. I accepted that it was OCD,
Yeah. Yeah.
and things have been on the up. But what I would say is that I think, and again, I'm not a doctor, I think a lot of this stuff, and there's a lot of debate within OCD people about this, because no one really knows the answer. But some people think it's genetic. Some people think that it's sort of about sort of like experiences at a younger age. I think that it's like genetic, but it's unlocked by a trauma.
Good.
So
Yeah.
so that's kind of interesting, you saying that about your mum a little bit. And I think
Yeah.
it's, and I think people do, I think people who, you know, cleverer than me would agree on this. I think a lot of it is about your brain trying to keep you safe but getting it wrong.
Yeah.
So, you
Yeah.
know, but what you're saying when you said something out loud, I guess you would call, for me, that immediately that sounded like a compulsion. Like
Well, it
that.
was.
Go on,
It
sorry.
was. It was. Well. It was what I was trying to do to rewire my brain into knowing that it was ridiculous, kind of thing.
But what I suppose what I would say, I mean, if it worked, if it passed, then
Yeah.
this might be irrelevant. But I guess that, say, if I have an obsession that someone thinks something terrible about me, which is quite a regular one, then I will ask someone to tell me that I'm being ridiculous. And
that's a good one.
But they would call that, like, OCD people would call that a reassurance. So that's the same as, like, thinking that you're infected with something and washing your hands, or
right.
And actually, the treatment, and this is crazy. The treatment is to resist the compulsions. So actually, the reason why the way that people sort of get better with OCD is that they almost go towards the thing that fuels anxiety.
Yeah.
So I know a guy that he's obsessed that there is sort of a killer virus in the air, which obviously COVID was great for him. And he every day he goes and sits next to a bin.
Yeah, it's the bring it on approach. If you when I got really bad in lockdown, I spoke to, you've had him, Bill Ryder Jones.
Yeah, legend.
Spoke like one of my heroes, really. I spoke to him about what's it called again? He recommended The Panic Switch.
All right.
That book. And it's very good. It's kind of it's that approach. It's if you're feeling like you're having a panic attack or gonna have a heart attack or all these things, just say, come on then, let's have it. Let just end me now if you think you're gonna do it, kind of thing. That kind of approach of, all right, if I'm having a panic attack, let's do it, let's get it over and done with. And that will that should in theory bring it down. And it's worked for me before. Because it's the resisting that gets you more panicked. You're thinking, oh God, my heart's going, like I've got to resist it, got to like breathe and stuff. And obviously breathing's great, but it's that can kind of heighten it more. This guy explains it much better than me, but it's a good book.
Yeah, I mean, he said, without sort of talking in detail about Bill's stuff, but just what he laid out in the podcast that we did, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
I mean, firstly, everything about the things that Bill finds difficult is so obvious if you have any kind of understanding of mental illness or mental health. It's just so obvious. The things that he went through and how that has affected him. But he was talking about like exposure response prevention, exposure therapy, and that is the treatment for OCD. And with CBT in tandem, but it is that thing. And he was saying just how difficult he found it. Like, he knows what to do. He knows that he has to. But it was kind of, I don't know, man. I don't know. Yeah, like I say, I think he went through something unimaginable, But,
of course,
But I do think you talking about, your childhood, it sounds very. He talks about it very evocatively, and it did kind of remind me a bit of when my parents just wouldn't speak to each other for weeks, and you'd just be in the house like trying to, get on with your stuff, but there was this mood, there was this fog of like, sort of, I don't want to say hatred between the two of them. I'm not quite sure it was that, but they certainly didn't, they let the sort of toxicity of their relationship kind of engulf the house. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was scared of everything. And I wonder whether that's because even when you were saying that thing about your kids, kind of, that you don't want to pass some of this stuff on to them. That felt a little bit OCD as well, if I'm being honest. That felt a little bit sort of meta anxiety in a way, like worry,
I find myself to be very controlling sometimes, and that scares me a lot, to be honest, because I've got a really good relationship with my wife. Like, we just get each other, and I'd like to think that I've never controlled her, but she would never let me anyway. But there is, I think that anxieties and stuff, there's definitely little kind of like tiny little. I guess you could. I don't know. I hate that word, but like microaggressions microaggressions of controlling stuff, and that's outwardly but also inwardly, and trying to make sure that I don't pass that on. I think you're right. It's quite a controlling thing, but I also think there's amazing things that I'll naturally pass on as well, that I've been passed on from generations. But there's there's levels and levels and levels. My great grandfather could have, gone through a horrendous trauma that he then passed on, and that's been passed on. And 50 generations later, you don't know why you're passing this trauma on, but you are. It's a trauma that should have been left in the 1500s or something, And I think that maybe is a thing.
Yeah, well, I actually stopped seeing a therapist because they wanted me to do this like map of my family, to go back as far as possible and to be like, oh, what happened to this person and stuff. And
right,
I stopped seeing them because I just thought this is a bit woo, and I was definitely in it. I was at a bit of a moment where I was like, I need something much more practical than this.
Yeah.
But actually, I've done a bit of reading about it, and actually, there's a lot of things that we don't understand about our DNA. Again, what do I know? But I have read things, and I think they are, they're backed up by peer review studies, that people have started to believe that perhaps things like trauma is woven into our DNA, and that kind of shapes us kind of, from generation to generation. I mean, I find that absolutely fascinating, to be honest.
Yeah.
I will say this though, right? This record is so good.
Oh,
Like,
man.
it is so good. And I think the thing is I don't know. We are in such a weird place in music. I mean, obviously, the music industry is absolutely broken on every level. It almost needs to be turned off, put in rice,
Yeah.
on again. Like, it feels like the fall of Rome. Nothing works. I think it's got to completely break before it can be rebuilt, because music's obviously always amazing, but everything about all the infrastructure is totally broken.
Yeah.
But I also think as well that I think this record you made is really brave, because it's so it's so exposed. Like that first song is so bruised and weary, and there's like little slivers of doomed romance in it, and it just proceeds through the record, and it's so out of step with what everyone else is doing. Everything feels like everything feels very synthetic at the moment, and this just feels like a record made by proper people, actual people. I think it's amazing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That does give me, I'm not just saying thank you, that does give me a lot of validation. But because what you said about it is everything I wanted it to be at the start, really. I think we've always wanted to make records that don't sound like every other indie band, but sometimes you can do that and it can just be like, whatever, just experiment and it will sound different. But this, with the help of Bill, we had so many conversations when I was going up to the Wirral about this, and how he wanted me to be raw, and how he felt that I think one of the words he used were actually some of the earliest, not the earliest stuff, some of the previous stuff was a bit desperate at times. And I completely got it. I'm glad that he said that, because it's some of the stuff is just me hiding behind music, or, us trying to, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? I don't know what it was, but I wanted it to be raw. I wanted it to sound like a band. We're a good band now, so we haven't always been an amazing band, but we take ourselves very seriously. Well, seriously enough anyway.
I mean, that's definitely tough love from Bill Ryder Jones there. Was he trying to sort of push you? Was he trying to push you to somewhere where you perhaps hadn't been before?
Yeah, he was trying to. I went to him because Cav told me, our guitarist, our bassist, sorry, he's always tried to get me to go with Bill. We've been fans of him, but we've just, I never thought it was the right time. And then I started making these songs, and I thought, this is probably the right time. And I just wanted us to be a a band that sounded raw, that didn't sound compressed, didn't sound like there's like 50 stacks of I won't name any names, 50 stacks of drums or guitars and stuff. It just sounds. I don't find that very inspiring. I don't think anyone does, and it's great for festivals and whatnot and Radio One, and that's amazing. But whatever. Anyway, went to him. I called him and I got him a really good spot. I think you really do have to get Bill in a good spot sometimes. Sometimes I won't hear back from him for a few weeks, and then sometimes we'll have the best conversation in the world, and that's fine. I love him for that. And we had a really amazing conversation. And he said to me, obviously I know about your earlier stuff. You're a great songwriter. I love the melodies. I love the idea of producing your band because I've always wanted to produce a really great record that's raw and full of melody, something like Super Furry Animals or something like that. We just talk for hours about music, and we have very, very similar tastes, and all those tastes align with the sensitivity and emotional and the raw kind of love that's given to you with these records, stuff like Red House Painters, Mark Kozelek, Low, and it's like a lot of the slowcore stuff, a lot of stuff that really puts it all out there. And then also, Super Furries, all that stuff. And then, yeah, I don't know, it was just magic. He back to what you were saying, that's what he wanted to bring out of me. We had conversations about our childhood with each other, much like this conversation. And he wanted me to put that out there. He thought that was interesting. And it's true, isn't it? I think when he says the word desperate for some of this output before, as much as I stand by it all, I do get what he was saying. I was desperate for a bit. Swim Deep was a buzz band that slowly went down and down and down. Our crowds got smaller and smaller and smaller. We've got a really incredible loyal fan base, but it's sometimes it has been desperate. I have been desperate to get my voice heard and put it out there. And
I only think that is though because I don't think that's so much about your. I don't think that's so much about your band, the decline. I just think that's
no. You're right.
Just the industry is sort of falling apart. But all the kind of mechanics really of the people who championed you, or the kind of the way radio was at that time, and just everything's changed. I think that's all that is. I don't think you stopped making good records, but I think the difference between this record and those records is that the songs have always been good, but they were almost sort of nosed in a way that is palatable for the mechanics of the music industry.
Yeah.
Whereas now with this record, it sounds like innovative in the sense that it feels like you've got your own skin. Does that make sense?
No, that makes a lot of sense. It's very nice to hear it put that way, because I've struggled to find the words. Because when I say I want it to sound like a band, I want it to sound like my band. And we can, you're right. Yeah, you can experiment, and that's the sound for it. You can do these things, but really, it's guitars, a bass, and a mellotron, and drums.
Big fan of the mellotron on this record.
Of course, yeah, it's on every track. It's just so much emotion in it, and we're done with synths. It was just like we didn't want to be, like you said, we didn't want to be synthetic. We didn't want to be as real as synths can sound. You know what I mean? Like look at bands like Tame Impala. It's like they can sound incredible. They can sound very full of emotion, but yeah, we wanted to do something that was just, there was no, I think you just put it well, to be honest. There's nothing going on that we were like, look, this is our like magical power or whatever. It's just like, no, this is the words and this is the melody and that's the sound. That's what we sound like.
Yeah, I've got a big belief that because nothing in the music industry works anymore, that there's no point in sort of trying to play the game. There's it's sort of a bit weird with me in indie music, because that's kind of my thing. I mean, I like all sorts of music. I'm just as into punk and soul as I would be, quote unquote indie. And obviously we exist in this sort of genre fluid time anyway. but it's quite weird is that essentially I am an indie kid, and
Yeah.
there's this kind of 10 years. I went off and worked for a rock magazine, and consequently there's certain sort of little eras. There's a few core indie records that I came to a lot later, so it's kind of weird because I was in this like kind of rock bubble, you know? So at the time when you were blowing up, I wasn't totally aware of what you were doing because I was too busy thinking of ways to make Papa Roach seem interesting in photoshops, you know, at the magazine I was working at. But I don't know, it's just like I've seen so many bands in my time in the industry. Yeah, I've seen bands really early on and thought, God, you're so unique and you're so exciting. And then as soon as they start getting on that treadmill of like, well, this is, you know, we're trying to get on this bit of the playlist on Radio One, and you know, they start sort of dressing differently, and the records sound quite synthetic, and sometimes you can see them live and you're like, why have you incorporated this bit into the song that is designed for everyone to clap along? And like they've lost a lot of that uniqueness. And I just feel like with this record is that regardless of any whatever era it existed in, it would be a really, really, really good record. So I'm gonna stop blowing smoke up your arse.
No.
It feels it feels like
really
you
bad.
get slightly uncomfortable with the compliment.
I can't. You noticed it. I thought I was actually being quite good.
Oh no, totally. There was a look of terror in your eyes when I started saying the nice stuff.
I don't know what it is. Like why I haven't got to the bottom of that one. I don't know why.
Because it's normal. It's normal. Like people, if you sat there going, "Oh my god, this is music to my ears," more, I'd be like, "Oh, okay, I maybe read this guy wrong. He might be a bit of a sociopath," you know.
You say that, but there is a bit of me that is saying that deep down. That is what I want to. I'm like, you know, I'm a musician, I'm a lead singer. It's like obviously there's a big part of me that's a huge show off and wants some kind of satisfaction and some pleasure and out of people looking at me and people talking about me. And yeah, I don't know. So I don't know why I'm so bad at taking compliments, but maybe that's why, because I know that I'm such a fucking egomaniac.
Listen, if there's something that can, I mean, ultimately, happiness is finding your own contentment. I think I do. I think I do believe that. That's something I have really learned from doing this podcast. Which, you know, I've worked for 2 music magazines, written for loads of other places, blah 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 blah. But I don't think I've ever felt more proud of anything than this podcast. But it is it's thankless, right? Like every episode. And if anyone listening to this, please listen to what I'm saying right now. Listen closely. Every episode I start the episode saying, if you'd like to rate and review, you know, it would mean an awful lot to me. And it happens, but it doesn't happen in tandem with how many people are downloading the episodes. And it is that thing of like, I'm constantly looking for that validation because I put so much work into it.
Yeah.
But as time has gone on, I've just been like, do you like it, James? Do you like what you've made? And the answer is yeah, or I wouldn't do it. And I think that's, I don't know. I don't really understand how you couldn't walk out of the studio after making this record with Bill and not be like, fuck me, we have nailed this. You know, the fact that what I think is sort of irrelevant, really.
Yeah. I did walk out of the studio and feel very proud of that record. And
amazing.
There's a very special feeling. I've never really, I don't know, maybe it's just because I've got older and I'm a bit more balanced, but I've never come out of the studio feeling, I don't know, more satisfied with that I'm happy that it's a good record. But then again, there's no pressure on this record. There's no one. Our label are great. They love it. They loved it when they first heard the first demo, which I was a bit dubious about, to be honest. I was like, how could you love it? You've only heard one demo, you know. But yeah, I did, and the confidence that I got off Bill was really important because he'd often come up to me. It was often, you know, after a session or whatever, we'd be in the pub and say, I just don't. He'd be very confused at the fact that I wasn't so sure about how good it was, kind of thing. He'd be like, this is really fucking, you know, worrying. Like, this is really good. I'm never gonna pat myself on the back until, I guess, it's so hard because I know it's so good, but I feel like I'm never gonna pat myself on the back until I get that validation, which is bollocks because it's all just like a chart position or whatever. That is validation to me, which is so stupid because, well, validation is you saying those words actually about how you thought it was innovative in its own original way or whatever. But I don't know.
I think when
Why
you
do we want people to hear it? Why do you want millions of people to listen to your podcast? And why do I want millions of people to hear my music? Why do I think it's more important that people hear my music than some other band that releases it that I think is shit, you know?
I think that, when you get out and you start playing these songs and you start seeing the people in the front row that are getting teary,
Yeah.
that's validation that I think is worth taking,
Yeah.
because that's the real stuff, isn't it? Every so
It is.
often, I don't really want to be, it's like I sort of said at the start of this conversation, like I'm trying to be a lot kind of lighter and just dick around more because
Yeah.
it's a big sort of part. I failed on this episode, but there is but at the same time, I don't really want to be some kind of ambassador for OCD or whatever, but at the same time, every so often I will get an email from someone going, I recognized a bit of I recognized a bit in myself of what you were talking about in a podcast or in an article you'd written or whatever. And I really hope they say that, when my book eventually comes out.
Yeah.
And that had led them to I don't want anyone to rack up diagnoses either. The whole point of this is to just get a direction to go in to get better and live happier lives. But when I get those emails, that's the validation. I just think it's that thing of like, if your wife, if your kid, in my case my guinea pigs, like you, or your friend, and they think you're a good person, they're proud of you. That's all
No,
that
you're
matters,
right.
really.
That is all that matters when I put the phone down, when I put everything down. That is all that matters. And you're right. There was this gig talking about validation. There was this tour we did last year, and it was like a music venue trust tour, which they paid artists more than what they usually get, and the venues to get them back on their feet after lockdown. And so it was a great tour. But some of those shows we did one in Hull, and it was, I kid you not, to seven, I think maybe seven people max. Three of them were kind of the support band.
Yeah.
And there was, it's a weird one because I get recognized places, right? Not loads. I'm not trying to say,
Yeah.
but I get recognized places and I go and play to seven people. And those people come up to me after and they say, like, where is everyone? And I have to answer it. And I'm like, don't make me feel fucking worse. But my point is about that show in Hull, three of those people were a dad. He was about 60, and his two sons who are maybe 25 or something. And he was sobbing when we played She Changes the Weather. And just, he was a proper lad, hands in the air, singing with his two sons. It's going to make me sad just talking about it, to be honest. But he was singing every word. And that song, that's one of the songs that does seem to it's been played at funerals, it's been played at weddings, and he was sobbing to that. And there were the only three people there singing, and that's the kind of validation I'm looking for. If that song has meant so much to someone in Hull and they've come down, we played to three people, when I look back on my life, I'm not going to think about the 70 people that weren't there. I'm going to think about him, and I'm going to think about that we did, that my story did that, and we did that as a band.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a trap to think otherwise. Like, the songs are the things that are immortal. The songs are the things that the songs are the things that matter. I think this, but we're humans as well. We compare ourselves to other people, and this person's doing better than us, and this person, or maybe maybe things were. But I mean, I am easily at this point in my career, like easily the most unsuccessful I've been in like 22 years. But I'm also easily the happiest.
It's interesting that.
Yeah, totally. And I also feel, building my own thing, it's going well. Enjoy the hustle.
Yeah.
When I was sort of everything not getting handed to me because I worked very hard for it, but it was, you know, I was, a lot of it was just bullshit. You know, you just want to be able to sort of feel happy about what you're doing, and I think in your case, you should feel proud as punch of this record. You know.
Thank you. I know I am.
When can I come and see you play the songs live and have emotions in person?
Well, so we got a tour that I'm hoping 3 people don't turn up to. And we got a tour in June, and it's where is it? It's like Manchester. Where are you?
I'm London.
Oh, you're London now. Okay, so we play at Village Underground in London.
Oh, nice. That's a local.
June. It's the
that's
start of June.
One. Yeah.
I might as well plug it. Let me do it properly, or my manager's going to be pissed off at me.
No, well, this is a note to myself, James. When you edit this episode, put the tour dates, put a link to the tour dates in the show notes. I have this like kind of weird sort of structure of how I edit the episodes, where it's like I do that and then I do the show notes, and then, you know, so that's a reminder to myself that I'll put the tour dates.
Great.
And the record's out June as well, right?
It's out June, yeah. Oh God, I don't know the date. You can put that one in as well.
Yeah,
I am proud of this record. It doesn't sound like it, but I don't know the release date. But I like the other things.
I'm all over it. I'll do the heavy lifting on that one. In terms of the OCD stuff, like I say, I don't want to sort of say to you. It sounds to me a little bit like you should do some reading on it. You know, if you feel free to get my email off Ash Collins. Hello, Ash.
Yeah.
I've known Ash for decades, and I'm sure it'd be fine to. I'm saying Ash, give my email to Austin.
Yeah.
And I'll happily send you some links and stuff like that, because it might just be worth going.
Appreciate that.
Does this sound like me? Therefore, could I get a bit of help with this? Because if I've learned anything from my experiences with it, is that, you know, I think everyone can feel better than they do, and I think everyone deserves to. Almost everyone deserves to feel better than they do. You know, so
yeah.
Listen, Austin, I feel like we could talk and talk and talk.
Yes, we could. Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to coming and seeing you play, and we should have a beer.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for making this record. Like I say, I think I'm going to wear it out and hopefully see you in tune.
That's good. Yeah, thanks very much for this chat. It's been great. I don't have a therapist, so this has been great.
Amazing. I'll put my check in the post.
Thank you, mate.
Nice to speak to you, bud. Speak to you again.
All right, all the love, mate. Thank you, bud.
Bye.